Buenas tardes, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, thank you to all for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, and the time and love and support you guys send my way or take. From the heart, I highly appreciate every one of you. Also, do please help the message get out there by liking, sharing, subscribing, and hyping the video. Gracias. Well, getting right into the topic on hand. Today I want to touch on Pomona Mike and those that have been with me on the camarada that became a Pili, right? For certain reasons, we just call him C for his flacazo. Those that know, right? But basically, when I mentioned him, I spoke on one of the main reasons why I thought he got politicked on, right? Or moved on, which was evil secretary, right? That was helping him out here. When evil, they took down evil, basically, she took off with her kids. And they sent the homie down to PB, Puerto Vallarta. And anyways, when he caught up with her, he seen she had kids and basically told her, hey, they know you're here, get on where they don't find you, right? Because he didn't want to really do that to the kids, right? Over nothing. So, anyways, he got taken out for that, right? Shortly after he was made. Well, about a year. But, you know, due to certain things that came out recently out here in Mexico, I want to put the backstory out about Homeboy and touch on how jealousy works amongst politics, right? How sometimes you're a cool camarada, loyal camarada, trusted. Once you become a pili, you become a threat, right? Especially if you run the whole city. But more so, I want to touch on now on homeboys, right? We're so blind to see what really is. We get told to shut up, put up, and keep pushing. And sometimes we don't even get told that, but we know better, right? It goes far from being a campolero, in my belief, now that I see it, right? But anyways, we'll go back to Pelican Bay, right? When I was up there, I was on the linea with Boy from Pomona, Olive Street. He was a good homie, right? He was real close to one of my primos. That's how we really started uh, Torica amongst us, right? Anyways, he was under Pomona Mike, and he basically, word gets around. So I got asked if I could support with getting a little bit of material, right? And prices. So basically, I asked Boy, right? We're up here sitting down, and he told me, "No, it's for the señor." So I told him, "Oh yeah," and then we went off, and at the time, C was down in the Delano, I believe, and Capone from Waller Street. They were all from Waller Street, by the way. They were down in one was in Kern, and the other one was in the Delano, right? And they basically wanted to flip some, on the streets, and you know, which to me was firmes. At the end of the day, you got to stay relevant, right? And it was one of them things, though. I didn't really know Pomona Mike like that, and plus the things I heard, it was best just show your respects, but not to get too close. You know what I mean? Is basically I plugged them in and pull out, allow them to do their thing, however they did it, and it was none of my business, right? But throughout this day, again, I knew boy right from the linea, and his homeboy C at the time. The homie was a camarada, right? He was he was down there and basically had his jefito and his brother out here in Mexico. In one of them cities in the frontera, and they didn't belong to the gang, but they went back and forth, right? So they wanted Halle. So I told him amongst camaradas, let's boogie, let's work, make some cheddar, some queso. So we started doing our things. It's how I came to know the homie C. That's how we ran into each other the first time. And Capone, I really, I was between him and Boy. They did their thing, and Feria was good. They kept their palabra and everything. So again, it's dando y dando, pajarito volando, and the rest missed me with it, kind of, you know. And the Pili was doing his thing with a certain family member, right? Which it's rare. Everything, like I said, you gotta always be ready for that bad to go, cause it's gonna come, regardless. It's part of the program, right? But anyways, fast forward, C has a similar past, you could say, as mine, right? He would end up, well, he would end up doing his time in the state, and once he paroled, he made his way to Mexico under the under the understanding he was gonna build a pipeline for Mike, right? All he did was for Mike, Pomona Mike, and he was happy with that. Along the line, he earned his. Even though you're loyal to a Pili, there's always you're out here in Mexico and you're able to tap into things. Other Pilis come along. That's why I stated before that Pomona Mike once hit the feds, there's certain things, that are going to be asked and he has to answer, you know. But then again, Fedia trumps all that, right? But anyways, what ended up happening, Boy would end up getting out, Capone, and on the streets, they had they came out of Mexico for a little bit. The ones that stood behind was Peanut from Pomona. They were all Olive Street, right? And Necio, right? And when I made my way to Mexico, basically we started doing things together, right? Until, without the Pili's knowledge, to be sincere, that fool Peanut from Olive Street, he got greedy. I mean, we'll just say it like this. Amongst camaradas, I like doing things, right? Just to plug them up, let's just say, right? I used to get him a K of Negra for 10, 15. So he was able to make his queso too, right? And him, instead of trying to be show some love to his neighborhood, right? Overall, they were the ones flipping it. He would go way out, Instead of doubling it, he tried to go overboard, and just small things, right? Then I remember Nessie one time came out and he was throwing all kinds of Billy's names. He shouldn't have been going, And I told him like, hey, if I don't ask, don't tell. That's by what we should live by, right? There's no need for sake. Okay, you're stuck out here trying to figure things out. The Billy's are gonna be mad. Do what you gotta do, There's no need to state it. Anyways, homeboy got upset with me, and I told C, I mean no disrespect, but you know, homeboy don't know me like that for him to tell me certain things I shouldn't know. it's how things reach ears that they shouldn't, Anyways, again, the homie he was loyal to that pipeline, right? That he ended up building, and he used to go out with us to the missions, point blank, right? It's how he got blessed. And I told him, I remember one time we're outside and him and a couple of homies, like the homie Bago from Rancho that just got clipped. He was with us that night, and basically I told him you made a mistake, right? When he got blessed, and basically it's because it carries a whole bunch of stuff, right? And because me and him, to be sincere, we had talked behind the scenes, and I thought it wasn't in our goal, right? At least in our conversation, it's just we were content to be in campuleros, sureños. But then again, things happen. Nevertheless, he used to go up, reach a lot to Baja, right, where Capone and Boy were at. And, I used to tell him, as a senor, you gotta start branching out. You can't just put all your eggs in one basket because you're gonna get stuck. TJ in a spot. There's too much chaos. But then again, we were cool with each other, but nevertheless, you could say he was above me, right? So I know it was his decision at the end of the day. The thing is, he started doing way more than just Pomona Mike was receiving. And Pomona Mike got upset, got jealous. I don't know what it was. But he started looking for things to start nagging, right? Complaining to homeboy like, hey, this and that. For example, one of the biggest, you could say, things that happened was, you know, like I mentioned, see, his dad and brother, they stood plugged in by their own means, When I got out, I honestly just didn't have that time, right, to be dealing with the extras like that, because the way we were wiggling out here, they found their plug. They were still going back to Pomona and Long Beach, and they were doing their thing. Well, even though they weren't part of the causa, our movement, Pomona Mike felt they should be kicking, right? Which respect is one thing, but when you tell them, hey, you bring 10 of those, five of those are mine. I mean, that's uh, that's too much to ask, from someone that's not pushing your cause. Let's just keep it sincere. I understand the way that we're taught. It's something normal now, right? We put up with it and keep pushing. It's just what we see everywhere now, right? But anyways, homeboy started taking a different route, which is not important, right, for the topic. And it's not when betrayal comes in, right? Keep in mind, Boy Capone, Peanut, Necio, they're from Pomona Sur, Olive Street. Same with C. They started off every single one. Everything started with C branching off to Mexico and started pushing to open that line just for them. You know, my family pulled out. I pulled out. C found his own lane. You know, it's what Capone and Boy were doing in Baja, right? And next thing you know, it's that type of thing, and I understand it. I did it, with the Sally with numerous of times that it just came down and Pomona Mike accused C's dad supposedly of telling. Never seen no paper, never presented it. He never even tried. He just said he was a rat and he was to be removed. Clip. Him and the brother. When two, three different pillies that were out here, they said it's BS. Homeboy wants him out the way because I guess there's just two pillies from Pomona is too many, right? When he holds all Pomona. Now, so everyone knows there's another one, but back then it was different. Anyways, I don't want to make it too long. He would tell Boy and Capone to clip him, right? And even though they knew it wasn't right, because I heard the conversation via phone, right, where they tried to, hey, dispense a homie, just orders from above type of thing, and see, did you ever verify it? Did you see the black and white? And it was just dispensers, right? And that goes to what I mentioned earlier. We roll with what they say, no questions asked. And again, I was that, right? For those that don't know, but on your own homeboys, you know, on your homeboy's dad, the one you grew up with in a child on their front porch, going into eating stuff, and you knew their lives. You know, again, I know a lot of people probably hear me out and say, hey, fool, you're scandalous though. You did it too with a celly that, well, again, I understand it, right? So when this happened, it was understood it was a political move, and of course he got a witness. Shortly after this is when the thing happened with Evil, and he could quit messing with his homeboys and stuff, right? For obvious reasons. And in reality, Pomona Mike couldn't tell him he had to be just for him, right? Because he was a Billy. Remember, they're at the same level regardless how long you've been in the clica, right? And he pulled out. He started branching off to other Billys in Mexico, right? And it's how he would get sent to Vallarta, right? Basically under orders, right? That not important, but it's how when he was there, he got requested to find homegirl, and he gave her the pass. If those have been with me, remember he actually came to visit me a couple times here at the ranch, and he was a good individual. I owed a lot to this cat, cause you know, for those that know, he's the one that he stood by me. There was six of us, camaradas, three pilis that got busted in Oaxaca. But when we got busted, I have no recollection of it. For those that remember that day, I got shot 6 times. I was out. The whole time we were in the joint in Oaxaca, I was in medical. I was in the hospital because I had to get my feet together to walk, to move part of my body. You know, just and homeboy was there every day. Out of all of them that were in that pinta, he used to go every day, take me food. Man, I know it sounds weird, right? But he also used to walk and set my butt in the chair in the shower and help me shower because I couldn't walk again. I will touch on the next, I'm continuing with my story, but he showed his loyalty. He was a loyal individual. That's why I laugh when people ask me, "Do you still speak to some of them?" Come on, it ain't out here in Mexico ain't like it is in California, where you only meet camaradas in the shoe. And believe me, you earn to have a lot of love for them too, right? And of course, for some pilis. But out here, you're literally up in the mountain, holding it down, supporting each other, having each other's back, really going through it. You ever stood on the side of a mountain for a week, hearing Marines out there hunting you down? There's certain things you do with an individual that, it goes above a lot of things. Just being sincere. Anyways, he was a cool individual. Of course, he was hurt about his carnal, dad, right? To the point that he was plugged in with some of his homeboys in his neighborhood, but he was pushing because he was a Billy. Then next thing I guess Pomona Mike asked for a favor. This got told to me literally today on how homeboy came from a snitching family, this and that, and then the secretary issue came up, and it's how they ended up clipping him. The worst part is, even though these two vatos are supposed to be doing time out here, they just already registered right why they're busted, and it was their own homeboys that came after him. Because after them taking out the dad and the brother, they still felt hell offended that C didn't want to mess with them. So it's kind of like what I always speak. There ain't no loyalty. The message is to show love to those that show love to you. Loyalty, true loyalty. You see, in prison, in the shoe, in the Fed, in Africa, China, Mexico, the cause is a cause. Where's out here? Certain things get a pass out here that you would say you wouldn't see still till date in Cali, you know. But again, it's been a year since they took out Homeboy. The reason why I'm sharing this with you guys is because one of them individuals tried to send a hyena to the ranch, right, with an offer for material. And I just laugh, because those, again, they didn't know me real well, because those that know me know I'm loyal pendejo, excuse my language. And out here in Mexico, everything goes. See, they don't want to go against the green because they were their homeboys and they were with Pomona Mike. But I hold grudges, right? And again, no paperwork. They shouldn't be a push. I would have pushed back the same way. But it didn't belong. The issue wasn't mine to deal with it, right? I had to respect. But you see, what I'm trying to put out is be careful what you get into. Not just in prison, on the street. It's different. When you're a mocoso, going in, rubbing elbows with that camarada, right? Since kids, since child, and going to a store, putting in a little jale, putting in work, maybe taking a bullet for him, then putting up with an individual that in reality has no compassion for you or your family. I guess the message is what I always say, be trucha with those that try to get on your ear, to commit yourself to something that just ain't there. Stay true to yourself, loyal to your loved ones.
This is when all we come up. This is when we start. We always